Howdy and welcome back to CompSci.rocks. With this video, we're starting a new series where we're looking at practice coding problems from CodingBat.com. If you haven't come across a CodingBat in your coding journey, it's a great website with a couple hundred Java programs for you to practice with. I'll link to the scoresIncreasing problem that we're doing today in the show notes. This problem is out of their AP-1 set, which is problems designed to help you practice with algorithms you're likely to see on your AP exam in May. So let's take a look at the instructions given and a couple of examples. You're given an integer array of scores, and you want to return true if every score is equal to or greater than the one that precedes it. Or we can flip that around and say that every number is no larger than the next number in the array. They also tell you that scores will always have at least two elements, which is important because we're going to be comparing neighboring values. And if there aren't at least two elements, there aren't any neighbors. And here's the starter code they give you. This tells us what our code needs to return and the name of the parameter we'll be using. But we're going to come back to code later after we walk through what we want our code to do. Since we need an array to look at, let's make one. And let's put some numbers in it. What we're going to do is start on the left side and work our way to the right, comparing each set of neighboring values. First comparison is between the values in index 0 and 1, and that's the 1 and the 3. 3 is greater than 1, and so far the numbers are increasing, but we have to be sure, so let's keep going. Same with the next pair. 6 is greater than 3. We haven't reached the end or found a case where it fails, so we keep going. And this pair is still okay. The instructions told us the array values were increasing if each value was followed by a value that's greater than or equal to it. So 6 equals 6 is okay. But be careful if you see a problem similar to this and make sure that the equal values are okay. Next comparison, 7 greater than 6, so we're still good. And here we hit a fail. 2 is less than 7, and we've discovered that our array isn't increasing. At this point, if we were writing code, we can go ahead and return false and stop. With this problem, all we care about is whether the array is increasing or not. By looking at these two values, we've proved that it's not, so there's no point to keep looping through the rest of the values. We know the answer. But we don't want to start the whole demo over, so let's slide those two back down, and let's switch the 2 with an 8. And then compare those two elements again. For now, just pretend that we went back and started over at the first and second elements, because that's really what should happen. Now, 8 is greater than 7. We're okay. We keep going. 8 and 8 are equal, which is fine. And 9 is greater than 8. We've made it through the entire array and didn't find any cases where a number wasn't greater than or equal to the number that came before it. So it's okay for us to go ahead and return true. Couple things to talk about here. First, notice that we didn't ever pull the last element and compare it to the next element because there isn't a next element. We'll come back to that when we look at our code in just a bit. And the other thing I want you to notice is we're able to return false as soon as we found a case where the question had failed. As soon as we compared the 7 and the 2, we knew that we didn't have an array that was increasing. It didn't matter what came next. We could go ahead and return false. But to return true, we had to go through the entire array. It wasn't enough just to look at the first two elements to decide if there was increasing. That'll be important in the code too. So let's look at the code and jump back to the starter code we were given. The first thing I want to do is return true at the very end of this method. This would be the point where our code has looked at every element in the array and not found a reason to return false. And by doing this first, it keeps me from forgetting. Now we loop through the array. Notice that we're stopping one early though. I will never get to the last element in the array. That's because there isn't a neighbor after the last element to compare. Same thing we talked about the 9 not having a neighbor earlier. Next, we use an if statement to compare the element we're on to its neighbor to the right. We want to check if the value we're on is larger than the next element. This is also why we have to stop one early, because I plus 1 would be out of range. And if it is, we return false because our code has found a pair of values in the array that cause the scores to not be increasing. Like we talked about before, it's okay to return false here without getting to the end of the array, because it doesn't matter what comes later in the array. We found a case where the scores aren't increasing, so the rest of the array can't change that. And with that, we're at the end of another video. Thanks for stopping by and watching, and be sure to check out our other videos and playlists that are coming up on your screen.